August 1944. A German tank commander writes his final diary entry. We can handle the American Shermans. Their guns are inadequate against our frontal armor. We outgun them at every range. Our crews have more experience. Pause. But when their artillery finds us, there is no training that saves you, no armor thick enough, no experience that matters. 2 weeks later, another entry. They dropped 200 shells on our position in 1 minute. From guns we never saw, directed by observers we never found. My tank survived Kursk. It survived Stalingrad. Today, it was obliterated in 60 seconds. This is not combat. This is industrial execution. Final entry, 3 days before he was killed. I no longer fear their tanks. I fear being seen. That diary belonged to a Panzer commander with 32 confirmed kills, an Eastern Front veteran, a recipient of the Iron Cross, a man who knew how to fight. He wasn't describing cowardice, he was describing a system. An American artillery coordination network so fast, so precise, so coordinated that German veterans who fought on both fronts said the same thing. Russian tanks were more numerous. American artillery was more deadly. This is the story of why elite German Panzer aces, men with Knight's Crosses and legendary kill counts, feared something they couldn't shoot back at. Something that saw them before they saw it. Something that arrived before they could react. Something they called the Devil's Orchestra. The Tiger tank was Germany's answer to Allied armor superiority. Its 88mm gun could destroy any Allied tank at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. Frontal armor measured 100mm thick, impervious to most Sherman rounds. Crews were hand-picked veterans, many with years of Eastern Front combat experience. The Panther offered even more sophisticated engineering. Sloped armor that deflected shells. A high-velocity 75mm gun with exceptional penetration. Excellent mobility for its weight class. German tank commanders trusted these machines because they'd proven their worth in brutal conditions. Meanwhile, American M4 Shermans struggled in direct confrontation. The standard 75mm gun barely scratched Tiger frontal armor. Armor thickness was adequate against German medium tanks, but vulnerable to heavier weapons. Allied tankers knew they were outmatched in one-on-one duels. Yet when historians examine German casualty reports, after-action assessments, and post-war interviews, a pattern emerges that contradicts Hollywood narratives. German tankers weren't writing about Sherman encounters. They were writing about artillery. Constantly. Obsessively. With a fear that bordered on psychological trauma. A captured report from Panzer Lehr Division, July 26, 1944. Enemy artillery response time averages 3 to 5 minutes from initial observation. Accuracy at ranges exceeding 10 kilometers remains inexplicably high. Counter-battery efforts prove ineffective due to enemy displacement speed. Another report, this one from 116th Panzer Division. Daytime movement results in immediate artillery losses from indirect fire now exceed losses from direct tank engagement by factor of 4 to 1. 4 to 1. German tanks were dying from shells they never saw at 4 times the rate they died fighting enemy tanks directly. The answer lies in American artillery doctrine, specifically a technique German intelligence reports kept circling without fully comprehending. They called it various names in translated documents: simultaneous impact fire, coordinated battery barrage, time synchronization bombardment. Americans called it time on target. Here's how it worked. 6 American artillery battalions occupy positions at varying distances from a potential target area. Battalion Alpha sits 5 kilometers away. Battalion Bravo at 8 kilometers. Battalion Charlie at 12. Each battery contains 4 to 6 guns, combined firepower, 2 dozen to 3 dozen artillery pieces. A forward observer team, sometimes just 2 soldiers with a radio, spots German armor. The observer could be in a church steeple, hidden in farm buildings, concealed in dense bocage hedgerows, sometimes positioned kilometers ahead of American infantry lines. High-risk assignments with casualty rates that reflected their danger. The observer radios coordinates, not to one battery, to a fire direction center that controls multiple battalions simultaneously. Now mathematics takes over. Fire direction personnel calculate shell flight time based on distance, propellant charge, elevation, atmospheric conditions. Each battery receives slightly different instructions. Battalion Alpha, closest to target, fires last. Battalion Charlie, farthest away, fires first. The shells arc through the sky at different times, following different trajectories, fired from different compass directions. But they all arrive in the same 60-second window. 200 shells, 1 minute, 1 killing zone. From a German tank commander's perspective, there are no warning indicators, no ranging shots walking toward your position, no preliminary barrage giving you seconds to button hatches and reverse into cover. just sudden, overwhelming violence that appears from nowhere. A Panzer commander described the experience in testimony recorded by British intelligence after his capture. The first indication is sound, a whistling that begins low and rises rapidly in pitch. Within 2 seconds, you realize what's happening. Within 3 seconds, the first shells impact. You have no time for orders, no time for maneuvers. Training becomes irrelevant. The world simply explodes. August 8, 1944. Near Sintho, south of Caen. Oberleutnant Michael Wittmann commands his Tiger tank in defensive positions screening German lines. If you study tank warfare history, Wittmann's name carries weight. 122 confirmed tank kills across 2 years of combat. Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords. Survived Kursk, the largest tank battle ever recorded. 2 months earlier at Villers-Bocage, Wittmann achieved legendary status. His single Tiger ambushed a British armored column. 15 minutes of combat. 14 enemy tanks destroyed. 15 personnel carriers eliminated. 2 anti-tank guns knocked out. 1 tank, 1 crew, 31 enemy vehicles. German propaganda celebrated him. Allied intelligence prioritized his elimination. That afternoon near Sintho, Wittmann's Tiger was found destroyed in an open field. No Allied tanks within visual range, no armor-piercing penetrations in the hull. No evidence of close-quarters tank duel. Just catastrophic damage consistent with artillery bombardment. Allied fire mission records confirm the event. Time on target barrage called on grid coordinates matching Wittmann's last known position. Multiple batteries participating. Coordinated simultaneous impact. Mission effectiveness, target destroyed. Germany's most decorated tank ace, a soldier who'd survived 2 years fighting superior numbers, killed by a system that didn't care about reputation, skill, or experience. Killed by mathematics, executed through radios and calculation tables. Killed by observers he never saw, directing guns positioned beyond his engagement range. Artillery doesn't discriminate between novices and legends. It simply arrives. The most dangerous American soldier from German tactical perspective wasn't a tank commander or infantry assault leader. It was the forward observer. Small teams, lightly armed, carrying 30-pound backpack radios. They embedded with frontline units, climbed exposed observation posts, operated in no man's land between opposing forces. German intelligence manuals identified forward observers as priority targets. Capture or eliminate them whenever possible. Disrupt their communications. Force them away from advantageous positions. Yet, for every observer killed or captured, another replaced him. The system proved resilient, redundant, difficult to suppress. When observers spotted German armor, response time averaged 5 to 7 minutes. Minute 1, coordinates transmitted. Minute 2, fire direction center calculates solutions. Minute 3, batteries receive mission parameters. Minute 4, guns adjusted, ammunition loaded. Minute 5, first rounds fired. Minutes 6 through 7, shells impact target. 7 minutes from observation to annihilation. Compare that to tank versus tank engagement timelines. Visual acquisition, range estimation, turret traverse, aiming adjustments. First shot, miss, correction. Second shot, minutes of back and forth maneuvering where skill, terrain, and equipment quality determine outcomes. Artillery removes skill from the equation. Remove terrain advantages. Remove the possibility of counterfire. A German Tiger commander couldn't shoot back at observers he couldn't see, or guns positioned 10 kilometers away. He could only try to escape. An escape required knowing you were being targeted before shells arrived. By 1944, American artillery possessed another decisive advantage: radio communications. Every battery maintained constant radio contact with fire direction centers. Every forward observer carried portable sets. Every fire mission could be coordinated across multiple battalions simultaneously. This created networked fire support where any observer could call upon any available battery. If Observer Team Alpha's radio failed, Observer Team Bravo could take over. If one battery was displaced or out of ammunition, fire direction automatically rerouted missions to available guns. German artillery remained excellent in technical specifications, gun quality, crew training, accuracy, all competitive with Allied equivalents. But German coordination relied heavily on telephone lines, field phones connecting observation posts to battery positions, landlines linking battalion headquarters to division artillery. Telephone systems work brilliantly in static defensive warfare. Dig in, establish communications, coordinate fire from prepared positions. But 1944 was mobile warfare. Breakthroughs, rapid advances, fluid front lines. Every time German artillery displaced to new positions, they had to lay new phone lines, re-establish communications infrastructure, manually coordinate between dispersed units. American batteries displaced and were operational within an hour, fully integrated into radio networks. German batteries displaced and spent hours re-establishing communications before they could effectively support frontline units. Response time comparison. American artillery answered fire requests in 3 to 7 minutes. German artillery averaged 15 to 30 minutes. In combat where positions changed hourly, where breakthrough exploitation measured success in kilometers gained per day, that response time difference was catastrophic. A German division commander's report from late July 1944 states, "Enemy artillery concentrates fire from multiple directions within minutes of our units being spotted. Any movement during daylight hours results in immediate and accurate bombardment." Offensive operations have become calculated sacrifices of men and equipment. Calculated sacrifices, not tactical operations, not bold maneuvers, sacrifices. Commanders were saying, "We know our soldiers will die. We're ordering them forward anyway because we have no alternatives." That's not strategy. That's desperation. German artillery attempted counter-battery fire. Doctrine called for identifying enemy gun positions, calculating firing solutions, destroying enemy artillery before they could continue bombardment. Germans had skilled observers, quality range-finding equipment, experienced gun crews. But 3 problems destroyed German counter-battery effectiveness. First problem, flash spotting required time. German observers visually identified American gun flashes, calculated approximate positions, radioed coordinates, waited for their own batteries to receive instructions, calculate solutions, range and shots. By the time German shells landed, American batteries had already displaced, packed up, moved 2 kilometers, established new firing positions. American doctrine assumed counter-battery fire and planned for rapid displacement. Second problem, Allied air superiority. Any German artillery battery that fired during daylight exposed its position. American forward air controllers worked alongside artillery observers. If German guns revealed themselves by firing, Allied fighter bombers arrived within 20 minutes. German gunners faced impossible choices: fire and risk air attack, or remain silent while friendly infantry died under American bombardment. Third problem, ammunition production. By mid-1944, American industrial output produced artillery shells at rates Germany couldn't approach. American divisions fired 10 to 20,000 shells daily during major operations. German divisions rationed ammunition, limiting batteries to several hundred shells per day. Even when German counter-battery fire achieved accuracy and timeliness, Americans absorbed losses and continued firing. Industrial capacity meant destroyed guns were replaced, casualties were rotated out, ammunition stocks were replenished. Germany couldn't match that sustainability. Thousands of German soldiers fought on both eastern and western fronts, transferred between theaters as strategic situations demanded. After the war, historians interviewed these veterans, asking comparative questions about combat experiences. Their answers reveal consistent themes. Hans von Luck, commander in 21st Panzer Division, described both fronts. In Russia, we faced overwhelming numbers, waves of T-34s, human wave infantry assaults, brutal, chaotic, intensely personal combat where individual skill mattered. In Normandy, everything changed. Precision replaced chaos. Coordination replaced mass. We weren't fighting soldiers. We were fighting an industrial system that processed us like a factory processes raw materials. Autocarius, Tiger Ace with over 150 confirmed kills, veteran of Eastern and Western fronts, Russian tanks you could see. Russian attacks followed patterns you could predict, prepare, counter. American artillery appeared from nowhere. Directed by observers we couldn't locate, coordinated through communications we couldn't intercept. You couldn't fight it. You could only survive it or die. Notice the language. Not describing firepower or numbers, describing helplessness, describing the psychological impact of facing threats you cannot counter through skill or courage. Eastern Front veterans felt they could fight back, use superior German optics and gunnery, exploit tactical situations, apply experience gained through years of combat. Western Front veterans felt hunted, tracked by invisible observers, killed by weapons they couldn't engage, defeated by coordination they couldn't match. One veteran summarized it simply. In Russia, we fought soldiers. In France, we fought mathematics. Soldiers can be killed. Mathematics cannot. Let's examine psychological impact. Artillery lethality statistics tell half the story. The other half involves what constant artillery threat does to combat effectiveness. Imagine you're a German tank commander. You survived Kursk by reading terrain, exploiting positions, using superior equipment intelligently. You've destroyed 30 enemy tanks through skill and experience. You're confident, competent, decorated. Transfer to Normandy. First combat day, you occupy a defensive position in tree line cover. You scan for enemy tanks. Horizon remains empty. Then, sound. That distinctive rising whistle, 3 seconds of recognition, 200 shells in 60 seconds. Your position, carefully selected and camouflaged, obliterated. 3 tanks destroyed. 15 crewmen killed. You never saw the observer who spotted you. Never saw the guns that fired. Never had opportunity to employ your training, experience, or equipment advantages. You simply existed in the wrong place while an observer held binoculars and a radio. Every subsequent position you occupy, you're wondering, am I being watched right now? Is someone calling coordinates at this moment? Are shells already in flight? German after-action reports document this psychological erosion. Tank crews refusing daytime movement. Veterans with iron crosses experiencing combat stress reactions. Entire units reporting combat ineffectiveness not from casualties but from fear of movement. A regimental commander wrote in August 1944, "Personnel no longer fear the enemy, they fear being observed." Distinction is significant. Combat motivation remains intact. Will to fight remains strong, but soldiers have learned that exposure equals death, delivered by weapons they cannot counter. This creates paralysis that tactics cannot overcome. When your enemy fears being seen more than being shot at, you've achieved psychological dominance. When detection equals inevitable death regardless of defensive measures, you've destroyed enemy initiative. American artillery achieved both. Statistical analysis reveals artillery's true impact. German armored vehicle losses in Normandy, June through August 1944, 60 to 70% from artillery bombardment, 15 to 20% from direct tank and 10% from airstrikes, remainder from mechanical failure or abandonment. Hollywood depicts Sherman crews heroically engaging tigers in close combat. German veterans remember sounds. Whistling sounds of shells they never saw coming. Sounds that erased tanks, crews, entire units before direct combat occurred. Forward observers operated in conditions that made their assignment among the most dangerous in American military operations. Small teams, typically 2 to 4 soldiers, carried heavy radio equipment into advanced positions. They climbed church towers that attracted German fire, hid in buildings that became artillery targets, positioned themselves on hilltops with minimal cover, life expectancy measured in weeks. German intelligence prioritized their capture or elimination. Snipers targeted them specifically. Artillery concentrated on suspected observation posts. Infantry patrols hunted them. Yet the system proved resilient. Every observer lost was replaced. Every radio destroyed was substituted. Training programs produced steady flows of qualified personnel. The network remained functional despite individual casualties. One forward observer could call fires from 6 different artillery battalions. If his radio malfunctioned, another observer assumed responsibility. If he was killed, infantry radiomen knew procedures to continue fire missions. Redundancy meant the system survived component failures. Germans never developed equivalent capability. They had forward observers but lacked radio infrastructure, coordination doctrine, and response speed. German artillery excelled in prepared defensive positions with established communications. But 1944 demanded mobile operations, rapid displacement, flexible response. German doctrine couldn't adapt quickly enough. By late summer 1944, German tank commanders received orders they recognized as death sentences, advanced to specific grid coordinates and established defensive positions. They knew American observers were watching. New artillery was pre-registered on likely movement routes. New daytime movement triggered immediate response. Some officers disobeyed, moving only at night, sacrificing tactical initiative to preserve units. Some followed orders and died. Some falsified reports about mechanical breakdowns to avoid suicidal missions. Discipline deteriorated not from cowardice but from rational calculation that certain orders were mathematically impossible to survive. One Panzer regiment lost 42 tanks over 3 weeks. 6 destroyed by enemy tanks. 31 by artillery, 5 by airstrikes. The commander wrote, "We are not engaged in battle. We are being systematically dismantled by industrial processes we cannot interrupt or counter." The phrase Devil's Orchestra appeared in multiple German reports, though its exact origin remains unclear. Some attribute it to soldiers describing coordinated barrage sounds, multiple gun types firing different shell weights at varying velocities, creating overlapping whistles that signaled death. Others say it referenced the coordination itself, an invisible conductor bringing separate instruments into perfect, lethal harmony. Whatever its origin, the name spread through German ranks. Soldiers mentioned it in letters home. Officers referenced it in reports. Post-war memoirs cite it repeatedly. Devil's Orchestra became shorthand for American artillery systems that Germans couldn't comprehend, couldn't counter, couldn't survive. Artillery wasn't glamorous, didn't produce decorated aces or dramatic combat footage. Artillery crews rarely saw targets they destroyed, Forward observers spent days in cold observation posts calling coordinates, seldom learning results. Fire direction centers performed mathematical operations, not heroic charges, but artillery won battles. Not by destroying every enemy unit, but by making movement suicidal. By forcing Germans into hiding during daylight. By creating psychological conditions that eroded combat effectiveness more thoroughly than casualties alone could achieve. When American infantry advanced, German positions were already suppressed. When American armor broke through, German reserves were shattered by coordinated fires before reaching engagement range. When Germans counterattacked, observers called barrages that stopped attacks before they developed momentum. The Devil's Orchestra played its final notes for that diary-writing panzer commander on August 11, 1944. His name was Hauptmann Ernst Weber. 32 confirmed kills. Iron Cross First Class. 2 years on the Eastern Front. Killed by a fire mission that took 7 minutes from observation to impact. The forward observer who called that strike was a 22-year-old corporal from Ohio named James Mitchell. He'd been in combat for 11 weeks. He earned $54 per month. He radioed coordinates, watched the barrage impact, marked the position as target destroyed, and moved to his next observation post. He never knew he'd killed a decorated veteran. Never learned the name of the man whose last words were written in a diary found in the wreckage. Mitchell survived the war, returned home, worked 40 years in a steel mill, and died in 1980. His obituary mentioned he'd served in Europe. It didn't mention he'd been part of a system that redefined warfare. That's what made the Devil's Orchestra so terrifying. It wasn't personal, it was industrial, mathematical, efficient. Weber could have dueled Mitchell face-to-face and probably won. Years of training versus weeks. Professional soldier versus drafted corporal. German optics versus American standard issue. But they never met. Never saw each other. Never had that duel. Because modern warfare isn't decided by the best warriors. It's decided by the best systems. Today, tank commanders in Ukraine write similar things. They don't fear enemy tanks most. They fear Turkish drones they can't see. Guided artillery they can't counter. Being spotted by thermal cameras at night and destroyed by coordinates radioed to guns 30 kilometers away. The technology changes. The terror doesn't. Being hunted by something you cannot fight back against. Being killed by mathematics delivered through networks you cannot disrupt. Knowing that skill, courage, and experience become irrelevant when someone invisible calls your grid coordinates. That's what the Devil's Orchestra taught. That's why German Panzer aces, men who'd survived Kursk and Stalingrad, men with Knight's Crosses and legendary kill records, wrote in their final diary entries not about enemy soldiers, but about invisible observers and inevitable shells. They weren't describing cowardice, they were describing the future. A future where battles are won not by heroes, but by systems. Not by the bravest soldiers, but by the most coordinated ones. Not by superior equipment, but by superior integration. Popular history credits Sherman tanks, praises Patton's leadership, acknowledges Eisenhower's strategic vision. But German veterans knew different truth. American artillery broke them. Not because individual guns were superior, German artillery was often excellent, but because the surrounding system was unbeatable. Radio communications, forward observers, fire direction coordination, combined arms doctrine, industrial ammunition production, replacement systems, training pipelines, all functioning as integrated network. Germans could match individual components. They couldn't match the system. Weber's diary ends mid-sentence. The last entry 3 days before he died. I no longer fear their tanks. I fear being. The artillery found him before he finished writing.